Could Diddy get bail? May sound like a long shot, but is there something that could maybe change the judge's mind? Well, we're going to be speaking with the bail bondsman to the stars, Ira Judelson, about whether Diddy may get out in a rumored new bail package. He has been working with Diddy's team. Plus, what can we expect about whether the rap mogul will spend the next decade or two behind bars? Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Big question we're getting in the Sean Combs post-verdict world is, what's next? Right? After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution and acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking, now we ask, what is his sentence going to be on those 2 charges, the Mann Act charges? And there's also another question that we're going to address today. Could he get bail? Could he get out? You might be saying, Jesse, wait a second. He was denied bail at every turn. And you would be right, he was. Despite proposing extensive bail conditions during the course of this legal saga, including a $50 million bail package and monitoring by private security personnel, the court was not convinced. Now, by law, the defense has the burden to prove that Combs is not a flight risk or danger to the community. And given the charges, the allegations, including that he was improperly trying to contact people in the case pre-trial, he was always denied release. But then there's what happened after the verdict last week. And this is an interesting conversation. And again, we're going to be speaking with Ira Judelson in a minute, who's been working with Diddy's team on possibly getting him released. But after the verdict, the defense applied for Combs to be released from detention pending sentencing. But that request was again denied by Judge Arun Subramanian. The defense argued, look, he's no longer charged with RICO. There's no longer presumption of detention. We have his passport. There's no access to private planes. There's no criminal history. This is his first conviction. He would be a fool to mess any of this up because he was just given his life back by the jury. He wasn't convicted of the highest charges. He was facing up to life in prison. Now he's not. He should be allowed to return to his property, his mansion in Florida. There'll be a $1 million bond. Now, the government argued, look, Sean Combs, he was convicted of serious charges, Mann Act violations. There was physical abuse in this case. There was prolific use and distribution of drugs. He committed crimes while under investigation, including having drugs in his hotel room when he planned to surrender to federal authorities back in September of 2024. And Judge Arun Subramanian denied the bail application, sided with the government that these convictions on these charges, by law, they trigger the mandatory detention statute, that the defense conceded Combs is violent. They conceded that at trial. Quote, we own the domestic violence. That's what the defense had said. The judge also made the point that it was impossible for the defense to demonstrate that he poses no danger, particularly given his violence after the searches of his properties and when he knew he was under investigation. That's the whole Violent Jane episode, attacking Jane, one of the victims in this case. And also that the evidence at trial showed there was a years-long pattern of abuse and violence. But despite the judge denying Combs' release once again, and given that his sentencing has officially been confirmed for October 3rd, that was agreed by both the defense and the prosecution yesterday, could he get out beforehand? It's an interesting question. Let me bring in right now a special guest. I am joined by one of the most renowned bail bondsmen, probably in the country, definitely in New York, Ira Judelson. Ira, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar, and pleasure to meet you.
You too, Jess. Pleasure myself.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. Talk about what you do. I don't know if everybody completely understands the process and your role in it.
You know, it's funny. Not a lot of people understand the world of bail. They think that a bondsman just raises his hand and you know, that's where it ends. With me, it starts with the people that you meet, the lawyers, the judges, the DAs, hearing about a bail, putting it together, which could take days, weeks, as in this case that we're talking about right now, Puffy. I started on this case going back almost 7 months ago when they brought me in as a consultant, because federal bail and state bail are 2 different things. State bail was what most of the bails that I write. Federal bail, they don't need a bondsman. They do go through pretrial services. But a lot of times major attorneys will bring me in to consult because they'll be denied and they'll say, hey, what do we do? So in this case with Puffy, I got brought in and we talked about possibly renting out his plane and keeping it in Honolulu. We talked about surrendering his passport, his family's passports. We talked about putting up his house. We talked about private security 24/7. We talked about a call log seat to see who's going to call him, also who's going to come see him, who's going to come in, who's going to come out, letting the government see what they have. So if anybody walks in to see him, they know exactly who's coming to see him. So a bondsman basically puts it together. In a lot of words, I'm a legal loan shark. I lend money to people that are in trouble to get them out of jail, and they pay me a fee.
Now, as we're talking about this, I don't know. I think the law is fascinating, all aspects of it, civil, criminal, and I would imagine that you probably feel the same way coming to check out Law and Crime Sidebar. But when you think about experts in the law, experts in litigation, let me tell you real quick about our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. So in the past few months, Morgan & Morgan, they secured a $9.3 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, a $5.6 million verdict for another car accident victim in Atlanta, and not to mention $1.8 million in Kentucky after insurance offered them a mere $5,000 in that case. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it truly so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks, and everything from signing contracts to uploading documents to talking to your legal team, it can all be done through the phone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. So I want to get more into this with Combs. There was a very unique bail package. And you didn't tell me if it was unique. $50 million, right?
Yes.
You know, the idea of private security. It was an interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought it on our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, and we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again, even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And, I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So, we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it would require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be? I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question I think that his defense put forward. He just got his life back. That's what they said. He wasn't convicted of the top charges. He was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he would be a fool to try to violate any of those conditions when potentially he may get a rather lenient sentence compared to what he was facing. So two questions there. Do you think that it would require him to be in New York as opposed to Florida? And do you think that you think he'd really be in a position to violate the conditions?
First question is, I can't determine what a judge is thinking. I don't think, and this is my opinion, that the judge would let him out of the jurisdiction. I don't know. We can do private security down in Miami. We could also do private security in California, as we did with Sam Bankman-Fried. I would probably think that if the judge would think about possibly a package, that he would want us to keep him here. When we first put the first package together, going a few months back, we did have an apartment here in the city that I did scout out and located a brownstone in New York that was sufficient enough, which we thought, which was one entrance in, one entrance out, for our security to be there, and no rooftop, couldn't get out from any of the windows. So we could always go back and see if that's still available. I don't know if it is or not. So I can't determine what a judge is going to think. I don't think he would let that happen if he decided to make bail, but you never know. This judge was very fair to both sides in the trial. And as far as would he want to screw up what he, after being, the convictions not coming through, I think he got to be dumb to do something like that.
Right.
He is going to possibly get his life back. I don't know what's going to happen in the music world. I don't know what's going to happen in his regular life, but he's not facing the time that he was facing before that.
And I'm going to talk about sentencing a little bit later on. The private security, right, that would monitor
Yes.
him 24/7. The argument could be, and this is something the prosecution's put forward, how can we trust that he's not just they're not bought and paid for, they're not really going to watch him if he's hiring them, there's a conflict of interest there. What's your response to that?
My team is ex-law enforcement, all gentlemen that have been involved either in the Marshal Service, FBI, police, even some CIA. So again, my people would not risk their lives on something, or risk their reputation, or even possibly a criminal charge on something like this. So my guys are vetted. They've been doing this a very long time. So they wouldn't jeopardize anything like that. Now, when we first talked about private security, Puffy wanted some of his people. We denied that right away. It's our guys. It's my reputation on the line here. And that's when I went to court, and Tony Rico and Mark Agnifilo both stood up and said, hey, Mr. Judelson is, his reputation's on the line here. He's been doing this a long time. I've bailed out Harvey Weinstein, Conor McGregor, Plaxico Burress, Cat Williams, Lawrence Taylor. So, I'm not going to put my reputation or my license in jeopardy, for X amount of money. To me, I'm going on. I might want to turn this business over to my son one day.
Yeah, the New York Times did a profile on you called Bailing Out the Stars. How are celebrities different? How are they different from other criminal defendants?
More demanding. When you get the phone call from the lawyer, or whoever, a publicist, anybody, it could happen in the middle of the night. A celebrity does not want to spend an extra minute incarcerated. And things change so drastically with, when I did Conor McGregor, he surrendered, he wanted out right away. Plaxico Burress, when that happened, we were talking, and Mayor Bloomberg was involved allegedly in the situation, and Plaxico's bail went from X to X to X. And then I'm on the phone with his agent saying, hey, I need you to send me a copy of his deed for his place in New Jersey. And then with Dominic Strauss-Kahn, obviously, the world basically came to a standstill, because he was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money to get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his it's his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen. The lawyer could get the bail, but at the end of the day, it's Ira Judelson that's running in, putting everything together, and the pressure. And I work in chaos all day long. That's my life. So, when it comes to chaos, that's my specialty.
You handle it well, though. You handle it quite well, given the chaos.
I have to. If I, as I said before, if I want to, have a nice home, I want my kids to go to college, I want things to happen. You got to do these things, and people rely on you.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said here, and it's important that you said it. Your reputation's on the line. So the idea of when we say, nebulous, how can we trust a private security team? I'm happy you clarified that. I want to get really practical here, realistically.
Shoot,
Sean
yes.
Combs is released on bail. Okay, let's say he's released. He's home confinement. What exactly is he allowed to do and not to do? Is he really there's someone's going to be watching him 24/7? They're going to make sure he has no iPad, no iPhone. Can he give directions to people like associates or other people that are involved? I mean, the concern, of course, is that even if he's out and he's around people, he can still shake things up a little bit. He can still get messages out. I guess the question is, what does it realistically look like for him? Does he sit in a room? Does he only confined to certain rooms day in and day out? Is he constantly watched on tape and all of his electronic devices are searched on him constantly? I mean, what does it look like?
Well, again, it's really up to the restrictions of the court.
Sure.
I mean, I have people out right now that are on ankle bracelets, and they can't go 400 feet. They can go 800 feet. They can go wherever depending on what the restrictions are. In Puffy's case, the way we were putting it to the judge and to the Southern District was, we were going to have a call log, so you could see who his calls were going to. We were going to try to take away his Wi-Fi in the building, which would have been a lot easy. We would have limited the people that would come see him. So at the end of the day, we had cameras inside the apartment that we were going to do, which our people were going to put up, and we were going to all let the government be able to get into that system to see who was coming in and out. Of course, there's privacy. So, we were going to make it very, very tight. Now, when you're incarcerated, and I have a lot of friends that I know that that are incarcerated, when people come to see you, if you want to pass a message, messages can get passed. We know that. So if he really wanted to do something incarcerated, he might be able to. If he really wanted to do something when he was out, he might be able to. I don't think that he would take a chance on something like that to risk what he's gone through over the last year. Again, opinion on my end, based on being 30 years in the industry, you just got possibly your life back. You were facing 30 years incarcerated possibly, and now you're going to take a chance on something like that. But again, no, I'm not in someone's brain. I can't determine how people think. There's a lot of people that feel they're above the law. So I don't know how Puffy thinks. But, my guys would be watching and monitoring him and reporting back. And again, my reputation is very important, because I'm going to go on and on and on in this industry. And I want judges, DAs, Southern District, Eastern District to be able to say, okay, we're going to worry about our case now. We're going to let Mr. Judelson handle what he does best. He's the expert. He's going to do it. Well, let us go do what we have to do. And we know that everything's going to, we're going to get the defendant to court. He's going to do the right thing.
Before I let you go, do you feel that there is a strong possibility that he could be released before his sentencing on October 3rd, so sometime between now and then?
Is there a strong possibility? I would say at this point, no. Okay. I don't know if we're, when I say the team, I'm on the outskirts of the team on the bail end. If it's in his best decision to get out before October 3rd. You're talking about maybe 3 months. there's a chance, that he could be sentenced to time served. Based under the law, he can be. He'd be incarcerated for over a year at that time. He could get a year and a day. There's a chance that the judge could hit him on a high end. I don't know. Knowing Mr. Combs and the way he thinks, I don't think anybody wants to be incarcerated. You feel like I just won. I just won my freedom back. Why can't I go to an apartment in New York and eat Chick-fil-A or have a steak brought in? I've been eating X amount of food inside. I've been showering with X amount of people. Why can't I have my own shower, my own bed? But again, it all determines on whether or not a judge can do it, and whether or not this package that we're going to put together, if we put it together back again, is sufficient enough to him feel comfortable. He might say, look, I'd rather you just stay till October 3rd, and this is what I'm going to do. But again, I can't determine what a judge thinks. I know the team has taught. We have gone back and forth. I've talked to we've gone back and forth. But again, it's all, Mr. Combs is actually, he's the person that's, paying for the attorneys. It's up to really him what he really wants to do.
Ira Judelson, thank you so much for coming on and breaking it down for us. Really appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate it, Jess.
Now, as we're talking about what to expect next in Diddy's life, I also got a chance to sit down with former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Matt Murphy about Diddy's potential sentence. So with no mandatory minimum with the Mann Act violations and up to 10 years in prison on each of the two charges, a lot of room here, a lot of discretion for the judge. Here's what Matt had to say.
So in federal court, this is actually very interesting. They rely very heavily on those pre-sentencing investigations. So essentially what will happen is there'll be a federal probation officer, and they do these for almost every case, where they will do their own investigation, where they'll talk to family members, they'll talk to employers, they'll talk to neighbors, and they will make a recommendation to the court as to suitability for release, suitability for time. And that's something that federal judges traditionally really adhere to. They tend to put a lot of weight on those, far more than they do in state court. The probation department can make a recommendation, but the DA will certainly have more ability, most of the time, to talk a judge in or out of a sentencing recommendation from the probation department. Federal court is different. They really put a lot of weight on those. So that's something that I think is going to be very interesting. And a lot of that will come down to what the individuals involved in that investigation, even though it shouldn't impact their professional recommendation. It's really, I think we're going to see what they thought of the case. Did they think he got away with something horrific here? Did they think that he was getting railroaded from the beginning? I think that may reflect in the recommendation to the court, but of course we don't know what that is yet. I don't know. If I'm his defense lawyer, I don't know if I am pressing the gas on that, trying to make this thing go faster. I mean, it's coming up soon enough anyway. I would want to give them the time and not press them, because you don't want a probation officer or anybody in the federal system to feel like they're being rushed.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to just go, okay, screw it, the guy should stay in.
The prosecution made the point yesterday. They said the point, like, we're not ready to give a really sentencing recommendation. We haven't gotten the report. There's people say, well, maybe he'll get time served, right? He's been locked up. There's other people say, no, the judge is going to throw the book at him. Even though the judge said yesterday, even though I'm denying him bail and I'm looking at certain conditions, this is not reflective or a preview of what my sentencing recommendation or what my sentence will be. But, are we looking at double digits? Are we looking, you think, at 1 to 5 years, time served? I know it's so impossible to ask, but it is a very specific charges he was convicted of.
Yeah, we're not looking at double digits.
Okay.
I cannot imagine the court imposing that. And remember, because this law is so old, and we're in an age of Uber, so literally somebody in New York City, a man or a woman who engages the services of a sex worker who lives in New Jersey, and if they pay for their Uber, that technically is a Mann Act violation. Okay, so it's a morality crime, and that it just does not carry the same weight.
Will the judge say, hey, listen, multiple instances he was doing it, not one Uber, he was doing it multiple times. You have two alleged victims here, Cassie, Jane, and violence, right? The used violence as one of the reasons to deny him bail. I wonder if he's going to look at, even though he was acquitted of racketeering and sex trafficking, different characteristics and components of his relationships with Jane and Cassie and say, this is aggravated.
It's a very interesting question. Can the court aggravate nonviolent offenses that he was convicted of, which are the Mann Act violations? Can he aggravate those when he was acquitted of the more serious charges, essentially acquitted of everything that involved violence, threats, all of that sort of thing? So it's a very, very interesting legal question.
By the way, great interview with Matt. We also talked about what we can expect with all of Diddy's civil lawsuits, including a brand new one that came out as well. We also discussed the verdict, the charges, so forth. You can check it all out on Law&Crime's YouTube channel right now. But for Sidebar, that's all we have for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.